Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life, a podcast about Nintendo and video games, episode 161. My name is NBZ, I'm here, your illustrious host, alongside the Yoshi of the podcast. It's Byleth, I don't know why I said that. There's a Yoshi sitting on my PS4. Obviously, Byleth, the one who we all ride and then let go of at the very end and fall into the pit. So here's the thing, right? I always, when I'm recording this podcast, there's my PS4 here, I've got my Wii U here, for whatever reason my Wii U is still set up, and on top of them, you can't barely see these consoles, because on top of them is just sitting a bunch of shit. So there's the Yoshi that I got from Club Nintendo, there's the Dragon Quest slime you got me from Japan, there's the Bob-omb tissue holder that you got me from Japan, and there is the Espeon plush.
Have you filled it with tissues?
I'm trying to. It's hard to find a box that fits in it because I think Japanese tissue boxes are slightly different from the ones here. So it's just, finding one that will work.
Get a bit of bog roll up in it.
I know, I've tried that as well, but it breaks off and then it doesn't really.
Oh god.
I'll give it a go. I'll give it another go. But yeah, I also have the Espeon that I picked up from the Nintendo New York store when I was over there.
Here's a solution to the bog roll.
Okay.
What you want to do is remove. If you just take a bog roll and you pull the inner cardboard out really hard, and then you're basically pulling the bog roll from the middle instead of the outside, and then from the middle it can come out through the bob-omb head.
Interesting. All right. Well, we'll try some of that stuff. I'll update people later if that works.
Maybe you need to tweet a picture of that bob-omb thing so people know what I'm even talking.
Yeah, it's basic. It's like it's kind of like a plush thing, but it's also got a zip in its ass where you stick a tissue box in, and then it's got the hole at the top where you take tissues out of. It was a very appropriate gift because, as Bali knows, and as a lot of people who've watched my videos know, I always have tissues on my desk or like toilet paper, and it's not what people think it's for. It's because I always have a cold. But obviously the joke's not made. Allergies, yes. Constantly. I am a mess. Anyway, hello. This is a Nintendo podcast. This is me. Bali's here. How are you doing, Bali?
I'm very good. There's a lot of delays right now. That's the theme of the week, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, that is the theme. Disappointment and delays, I think, for many people in lots of different areas.
I tweeted, is it like all the developers got around the table and said, right, we're all going to announce our delays within the same space of 3 days, because it just seems like it's nonstop right now.
I mean, the thing is, Animal Crossing's just scaring everybody. No one wants to take it on, Animal Crossing is going to dominate, and people they're running away. Final Fantasy, Cyberpunk, none of them can stand up to the
only games
light.
We're confident that they'll come out at the right time are the games that have already been delayed. So
exactly. That was the conversation we were having is... has Cyberpunk been delayed yet? And I was like, no, that was the first date they gave it. And so we were like, yeah, they're going to delay it. And literally the day after we talked about that, they delayed it. So
that Iron Man VR just got delayed as well. And that's that one was going to come out end of February. Now it's in March or May. I can't remember.
Yeah. Well, this is the benefit of Nintendo. They haven't announced anything really in terms of release dates aside from Animal Crossing, which already got delayed because it was originally going to be a 2019 title. So they can kind of roll in and be like, here are some dates, and they're so close that we can't really delay them because this is what we have envisioned. So I'm sure that will come soon. Obviously, we've been waiting for where's the Nintendo Direct? And it's like, here's a Pokemon one, here's a Fire Emblem one, or Smash Brothers one, I guess, that's basically Fire Emblem one, and nothing else yet. So I think people are patiently waiting. We'll probably get one eventually, but we shall talk about some of that stuff on today's show. So, Bally, do you want to let people know what the lay of the land is going to be for today?
For our first segment, we're going to be talking about the games that we have been playing. Our second segment will be some of your listener emails. And then the third segment is a bit of a news roundup. So we've got the Smash Brothers character announcement. There's a Fire Emblem DLC announcement. There's Pokemon Sword and Shield DLC announcement. And then there's a new trailer where Nintendo revealed, or sort of revealed, a bit more of Super Nintendo World, which is coming to Osaka in Japan this summer.
Yeah, more of a music video than a reveal, but nonetheless, interesting stuff. Intersection of a lot of Bally's interests there. Obviously, Bally, the biggest Charlie XCX fan, so...
I don't know who that is.
Yeah, I know. So yes, lots of things to talk about. Let's kick things off, though, with video games. I'm going to start, actually, because I think we should have a nice sandwich here, because I got two games, you got one.
Okay.
So I'll kick off with I finished up all the Crash Bandicoot games. So obviously last time I talked about Crash 1 and 2. I finished Crash 3 as well, went through that entire thing, and I will say that I think Crash 3 is definitely the best.
It's sort of ironed out some of the kinks. It's a bit more
so
easy
like
to play.
The levels themselves have a bit more width to them. I think I maybe mentioned this last time, but they feel like there's a bit more room to maneuver, and so to some degree you can kind of just run past enemies that aren't a problem, and that makes things a little bit easier. But it also really ramps up the variety, right? So like it's not just the running forward levels, it's not just the running away from boulders. You now have levels that have racing elements to them, or there's levels where you have a jetpack on your back and you're going forward through this thing and you have full kind of motion control, not like motion control with your moving your switch around, but freedom of movement, I guess, with Crash kind of moving about the screen. And there's also underwater segments as well. So some of that stuff works better than others. I really actually liked the racing sections. So you basically do a Mario Kart style thing, but you're on a motorbike and you're trying to race past a bunch of different cars. You start in last, and in order to get the crystal, which allows you to move on to the boss, etc., you have to finish the racing first. So a lot of it is
quite Crash Team Racing, or is it very different?
No, it's very different. I don't think it controls particularly well. It definitely didn't have enough time, development-wise, I guess, back in the day for them to make it something that was quite fluid. And so it is a case of a little bit struggling with the controls, but you really need to understand how they work, and like cornering is a little bit different and weird. You want to take advantage of boost spots, so there's like boost spots on the ground, there's jumps, and yeah, it took me a few times on like the harder ones, but I think it was a nice change of pace, honestly, because at this point I'd played 2 games worth of regular Crash Bandicoot levels, so having stuff like the underwater or the racing made it just kind of freshened it up a little bit.
Yeah, it's impressive to have trucked through all 3 of them like back to back in the close succession.
Well, the thing is, they are really short, right? Like they're not that extensive in terms of, like, they are difficult, and obviously I think it starts out as Crash 1 is the hardest game, and then it gets a bit easier with 2, and then 3 is probably the easiest of them. And saying 3 is the best one, I think talking about the difficulty definitely makes sense there, because it, like, they really overdid it in those first 2 games, and I think they pared it back once they understood, like, okay, I think we're just being a bit too nasty with our checkpointing and our hitboxes and everything. So Crash 3 just feels a bit more balanced overall. It's still hard in sections, and it still has some nonsense that, you know, I dealt with. But I think it was cool to get that perspective. And I actually played through most of this game as Coco Bandicoot, who is Crash's sister. This was the only game where she was playable in the original. She was actually made playable in the remaster for all 3 games. I played as her a couple of times in some of the levels in the first 2.
Is she the same, just a different?
She just looks different as a character model. She carries a laptop with her everywhere, I think is what it is. And she kind of has different animations. Yeah, it's a very 90s thing, isn't it? It's like, I'm going to carry my laptop around. Look at me, I've got a personal computer.
Wait, she wears like dungarees as well, doesn't she?
Yeah, she does. She has like a ponytail.
Yeah.
I like her design. It's pretty cool.
Watching Friends for the first time through at the moment, there's a lot of dungarees going on, especially amongst the women. Like, it's very much the look.
Well, apparently dungarees are back in fashion now. My sister wears dungarees all the time,
oh,
so
really?
It's the hip thing. She knows what fashion is. I have no fucking clue. So I just anyway. So yeah, the thing there with Crash 3 is that it generally feels more welcoming to play, and I think it just has some nice quality of life things that have made it easier.
If you're going to play one Crash game, would it be this game?
Probably. I mean, I would say maybe just play a bit of the first 2 to experience them. Okay. Unless you have nostalgia for these games, I don't think it's honestly worth it to push through the first game. The first game has such bullshit, like unmountable. It's unending. And the only reason I beat it is because I wanted to say, fuck you, I beat you video game, essentially. It was a hate play in many ways. Crash 2 I enjoyed a lot more because I had personal nostalgic ties to it. It was a game I played a lot when I was younger. And 3, I think, hits the best middle ground of, yeah, there's some bullshit, but also, like, I think there's some neat ideas here. It's interesting because a lot of the way it's set up is like multiple worlds again, so similar to the second game, and 5 levels per world or 6 levels per world, and each one doesn't really have a cohesive theme to it. Like, it's not like a Mario game where, like Mario 3, you have Big Little World or whatever, or even Mario 64. There's the each area has its own distinct personality. Each world just has a bunch of different levels. You'll have a racing level in there maybe, and then the next world will have like a variation on that type of level, that type of area that you've done in a previous one, but it's a bit harder this time and you throw different things in there. So there's not really much consistency to it. Actually, one of the levels I played, I was like, I recall the name of this level. Why do I know the name of this? And the level started playing and I was like, oh shit, back in the day, that one time I went to Charlie's house and we were playing Crash 3, we were stuck on this level, and it's like a Aladdin style kind of like Agrabah level you're going through, and this time I found it quite easy. It wasn't too troubling, but I remember us being so stuck on it. And the reason I remember the name of the level, I can't bring it to my mind now, but like as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, because we basically called up whatever hotline, like the PlayStation hotline, to help you with how to get through stuff and to get tips and tricks, etc. So Charlie was the only person I ever knew who did that. I never did that on my own, but he would always do it. It's like call up this hotline and just figure out.
I forgot Charlie used to do this.
Yeah. And so we just talked to a person on the internet or on the phone, I guess, who would tell you how to get through a level. It was weird.
I want that
times.
job.
Yeah, that would be a weird, interesting job for sure. So yeah, that hit me a weird bit of nostalgia out of nowhere. And yeah, the interesting thing this game does, I think, that doesn't quite work that well is they give you power-ups as you get through. Like, they kind of Metroid it, where you get a double jump at some point. Like, you beat a boss, and every time you beat a boss, you get an ability from them. So either it's the double jump, or later on you get a bazooka that you can just shoot wherever, which actually makes levels a lot easier, because so much of the fuck you of Crash is an enemy being on a platform that you're trying to get to, but they're kind of in the way and they're really hard to hit. So you can just stand back and be like, boom, 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 dead, and then just walk through the level, essentially. So that helped a huge amount. And there's some other stuff, like literally the end of the game, you beat the final boss, and he drops a power-up, because the final percentage, all these games were based on collectibles, right? And getting through the level once and getting the gem was just the progression, but also there was a hidden gem in each level, and there was another hidden thing. There's like 5 different hidden things in each level, and you had to get a reward for getting all the boxes in each level. So my final end game percentage was like 33%. Like, I'd finished every level, but if I wanted to 100% it, I'd have to go back through and get all this stuff. So the final boss gives you an upgrade that just lets you run faster, and I guess that helps for certain things that you can't get otherwise, which is interesting. So these abilities were kind of built into the game so that you could go back and 100% levels and make it a bit easier for yourself, I guess. It's weird, and the double jump, it doesn't feel great. It's one of those double jumps where if you go past a point of no return, you can't hit the jump. Like, you basically have to hit it after the peak of your first jump in order for it to work, whereas if you like do the full arc of one jump, it doesn't do like a second one.
Like very timing based.
Yeah, it's very timing based and not particularly great. What I want to say that I didn't mention last time, and this is the case in both of the previous games as well, is if you die too much, the game does have a system for helping you out. Essentially what it will do is it will just create new checkpoints that weren't originally there. So if the game detects, this person has died 5-6 times, they'll just add in an extra checkpoint in between the two that you're currently trying to get through, which sometimes helps and sometimes is like I've only got 2 lives left and I'm like a third of the way through this level. This doesn't really help me that much. I need more lives in order to start all the way over again. And I think actually if you die again all the way and you have to start over, they will keep that checkpoint there because it knows that you've died a bunch. So it's just a kind of, I think the developers understood that these games were bullshit back in the day and they wanted to...
So that's new to these remakes?
I believe so.
Okay.
I can't imagine the original Crash Bandicoot being that kind to the player because they feel like games...
Yeah, otherwise everyone would have beaten it in 5-6 hours.
Right, totally.
Thinking back, we know it normally took us like 10-12 hours to often beat games similar to that, you know?
Yeah, even if we beat them at all, which we never did, really.
Well, yeah, I'd never beat any games, to be honest.
Yeah, totally. But the other thing they do is, you know, the Ooga Booga mask, whatever it's called, the guy who's like, Booga Booga. Umdaga. He basically gives you an extra hit, so you can just take a bit of damage and not die in one hit, because... Again, it's one of those things I haven't really mentioned, but like, yeah, Crash Bandicoot's a game where you die in one hit. It's very unforgiving in that way. So on bosses, for example, if you die a bunch on bosses, they'll be like, okay, here's an extra hit. And so you just get an extra hit, which is nice. I think it works well. I think the bosses are probably easier than 1 and 2 as well. They're not really much of a challenge, which was fine. I was fine with that.
Is it a better looking game, or it's hard to tell because it's a remaster, I guess?
I think you can kind of tell that, like, asset-wise, they were definitely pushing a lot more. Obviously, all these games kind of look the same because they're being remastered in the same engine, and each of them has the same kind of lick of paint applied. But definitely there's a bit more ambition there, right? Not only with the different types of levels, but just the look of the environments, the types of environments they're going for, the theming around it. I think there's definitely a bit more ambition there. But yeah, I think generally, I don't think I mentioned this last time either, but I think this is one of the best ports I've seen on Switch. It runs really nicely, like solid 30 the whole way through, great handheld, looks pretty decent on the docked as well, but it's obviously not going to look quite as sharp as the PS4 version or the PC version or whatever, but it still runs really nicely, and it's a godsend as a handheld game, honestly, because it was a game where I played a level, died like 3 times, I was like, fuck you, put it down, and then like 5 minutes later I picked the Switch back up again, I'm like, actually no, I can do it. That happens to me a lot, and it was a lot of the way I played like 3D Land and stuff, is like playing a couple levels, putting it down, picking it up. Like, I just sit here with YouTube videos on and like kind of go through that phase, and that's a good way to play it. So I'm glad I got it on Switch. I think it's the type of game that works on the system, and yeah, in a world where we don't get that many amazing Switch ports, it's a very good one. So
nice.
As poorly as the series has aged, I really did enjoy going back to it. It's such a weird dichotomy. It's like, on the one hand, these games fucking suck. On the other hand, I had a great time and I played through all of them. So I don't know. I really don't know how to feel about it. It's very strange. So yes,
cool. That's
Crash Bandicoot wrapped. I've done them all 3. Make a new one. I feel like Activision have seen the pressure now after releasing all these re-releases. I think they're going to make a new Crash and a new Spyro at some point. That might be announced this year. I have a feeling. We'll see.
A crossover?
A crossover, potentially. Anyway, from one Sony mascot to the other, let's talk about how Naughty Dog evolved in the last 20 years, right, Bally?
Yes. Quite... I mean, if you compare 2 games like Crash Bandicoot and The Last of Us, it's very much like they couldn't really have changed genre much more in some ways. I guess they are both third person.
They couldn't have changed tone or like ambition or anything. Like it's completely.
Yeah, it's weird. But yeah, obviously, Last of Us Part 2 is coming out later this year in May. And if you've listened to this show since roughly the middle of 2018, you will know that Bally has become a massive Sony fanboy. And
Clearly,
when you hear about people talking about big games of the decade and, you know, big franchises, especially Sony exclusives, it's always talked about The Last of Us. You got to play The Last of Us. It's like critically, just people absolutely love this game, and it's a game that it's that thing again where if I've not got the system to play a game and people are hyped on it, I kind of tune it out. I don't follow the hype that much, and that certainly was the case with this game, where you watched a Let's Play of this game when it came out back in 2013, MBZ.
Yes.
And other than that, the two of us really hadn't talked about this game, really, because even when I got a PS4, you weren't like, oh, Bally, you've got to play The Last of Us. Like, there was still a lot of PS4 exclusives that you recommended I try first, which I played like Uncharted, and but then when you talk to like other Sony fanboys, they are all just like, you got to play Last of Us. So it was always on my radar that I should probably play this game. But here's the thing. I've never played a scary game in my life. I never have wanted to.
Oh, okay. I want to bring this up because I don't know if you remember this. There was a time at Ali T's house where he had a demo disc for like one of the Silent Hill games, and we were sitting there trying to play it, and we were just like, no, fuck this. Like, there was like 4 of us in the room, and we were just like sitting there passing the controller around, and it was Silent Hill, and I was like, I can't fucking do this.
That game to my memory is like a 15 or whatever, and Last of Us is not for horror reasons, it's more for violence reasons, is clearly an 18, and it's like, yeah, I just could not handle it. I cannot handle like jump scares, and I don't particularly like apocalyptic worlds with zombies in, or horror settings, and like this game has them all. I've never even played like a survival based game where you're like essentially crafting lots of stuff to survive. I've just never dipped my toe in any of it. So I think the impact this game had on me was maybe made stronger by the fact that it was so fresh and that I'd never tried anything like it before. Because I think there's lots of people who have played many zombie games, played many horror style games, played many survival style games, who maybe were very much impacted by The Last of Us, but more for its story than anything else. Whereas I think that almost every aspect of this game really hit me quite hard. And that's what I think, having listened to lots of spoiler casts following the game, and I'm not going to spoil anything here, but what I like about this game is that it doesn't fixate on the world and how the apocalypse comes. You play the opening, and then there's a 20-year jump, and then boom, you're in the middle of the game. And from there on, it feels like most of the game is about the relationship, and especially between Joel and Ellie, like the two protagonists. And I think that this game does that sort of Uncharted thing where there's often points in the distance that you're constantly working towards. And it is all about that journey and their relationship. It's not so much about what's the world going to become. And that plot is still there, but it's almost like a secondary plot in relation to the premier plot of Joel and Ellie, which is the most intense, intriguing. These are probably the two characters I've cared the most about in any video game story, full stop. And I'm gradually expanding my horizons in terms of number of story-driven games that I've played. And for me, this game just kind of sits right at the top in that sense, because I came away from this game not being able to think about anything else. And it's really just had this huge impact on me where I'm absolutely dying for The Last of Us Part 2 now. And it's the hype levels have been ratcheted up massively from this game. And I should say, obviously, I played the remaster on PS4, which came out a year later, I believe, 2014. The original game came out in 2013 on PS3. And I played through the entire thing with Caroline sat next to me. This was
emotional support.
Well, it was for two reasons, and one of these reasons was much more important than the other. One was I wanted Caroline to see the game, and I said to her, supposedly this game has a really great story. I think you'd enjoy it. And secondly, I need some support because there's a lot of dark moments in this game where you're walking around in pitch black and there's zombies attacking you, and it is scary. This game never does the jump scares in that sense, and I'd argue that all the jump scares are actually human combatants. It's never the zombies doing the jump scares. The zombies are fairly docile. Yes, a lot of them will charge at you, but it's not. It does horror, but it's nothing like what they hold back on the horror aspects. And don't get me wrong, the violence is gratuitous, and it actually links fairly closely to the story, and I don't really want to spoil the ending because it is kind of all linked in that sense. The violence plays an important role. I'll just leave it at that. And I just think that this game ended in places where I wasn't expecting it to end, and has really set up for part 2 just in an awesome way. But yeah, Caroline was pretty damn scared of. I know I said this to you off mic, MBZ, but Caroline is pretty scared of a lot of films and a lot of TV shows we watch when there's jumpy stuff or zombies or anything remotely scary that I would find. I'm a massive scaredy cat, but there's some stuff I don't find that scary that Caroline will react to. But I always say Caroline makes it like you're watching the thing in 4D, and what I mean by that is I'm consciously okay with what's going on screen, but Caroline is reacting, and that's affecting me, and then as a result it scares me, what's happening on screen.
Right, so if she screams outside of the game, it's going to make you more scared, God, even though
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So Caroline in some ways made this game even more tense perhaps than it already is. And I should also say I played the game on easy. I think easy, I still died a lot in this game. There's a lot of moments that are difficult. I think you have slightly more resources on easy. I think the enemies are slightly lower in number at points.
Or maybe just easier to kill generally, lower health or something. It's not really.
Yeah, that's the aspect. I think they're not actually easy. I think they still have to stealth them or headshot them or do whatever, but there's often fewer of them, or you often have fewer resources to take them on, sort of thing. That's what makes it easier or harder based on difficulty, I think. But
yeah.
So I thought it was going to be more of a walk in the park on easy, and it certainly isn't a walk in the park. And I'm not that bad at third-person shooters. Like, I play Uncharted on normal. I've played the first 3 Uncharted on normal now, and games like Horizon, it involves a lot of third-person shooting, and like, so I'm not that. I'm a pretty keen shot by this point at most of that style of game, and you definitely need that a lot in this game. Like, there's a lot of moments where, because of the lack of resources, you are relying more on those bullets, making those headshots, getting those stealth kills. And I actually found that stealth-wise, it almost felt like the game was designed that, yes, you could stealth kill a handful of things, but you're not going to be able to stealth kill everything. Like, eventually you get spotted. Eventually stuff happens. And that happened almost so frequently that it felt like the game was forcing me down that route in a way. But yeah, I can't stop thinking about this game. It's action-wise, it's a lot more solid, and it is still very different to Uncharted. It doesn't feel very similar in so many ways. And I think it just really stuck the landing in terms of, like, I was really getting into the resources and making the right things. It's like, all right, do I want to make a health pack or like a Molotov cocktail? And like, because they use similar ingredients, you can't make both. You have to pick often. And I love that choice. It's like, well, what's my health on now? What are the enemies I'm about to face? Because in my experience, the Molotov cocktails worked really well on the zombies, but less so on the human AI, because the human AI I thought was actually very intelligent in this game. There are points where they do creep up on you, they do kind of swarm you, and they flank you, and that happens a bit in Uncharted, but I felt like this was a bit of a step up in terms of how intelligent they are.
So I get the feeling then that you did really enjoy playing the game as opposed to just going through it for the sake of the cutscenes and the storytelling and things like that. Because for me, as someone who, you know, I owned a PS3 when this game came out, so I very well could have just bought The Last of Us and played it. I didn't back then. I'm more of a wuss then than I am now. But like, once I had watched the playthrough, I still seen zero reason for me to ever play that game, because I got what I got out of it, which is the characters, the storytelling, the narrative. And it's weird. Like, I don't feel any desire to play it. There's nothing about it that speaks to me on that level. I agree. I think had I watched the Let's Play, I would not be that keen on playing it. But as a complete package, like, the action is still like a really awesome part of the game. Like, it's there are tense moments. There's stealth. There's like boss fights in a way that are like stealth focused and just creepy, and like there's a level of interaction between both the gameplay and the plot that they don't feel completely separate in a way where I do think there is a lot more to get out of the game from playing it, as much as I think the story can stand alone. There's a unique way in which Naughty Dog does that type of stuff as well, right? Like, I don't know if I mentioned this on a show or if I just talked to you about it, about how there's a moment in Uncharted 4 where Nathan Drake is a kid and he's got his older brother, and they're climbing up the structure, climbing out over this house, and Nathan Drake, because he's small now and he needs to rely on his older brother, he can't climb certain areas, so he has to rely on his brother to like pick him up and take him over areas or higher parts that he can't quite reach. But I thought that was effective storytelling through gameplay, because like, you can't do that, you need the help of your brother. It's building this relationship. There's a moment in this game where Joel is like, you have this canned animation of a ladder, right? And it's always about like just waiting for the other character to come, the AI and you leave your hand there to like boost them up or whatever, and there's a moment where that happens and Ellie doesn't come over, and she's just sitting there, and like, because something major has happened that has completely shifted the mood and everything, and that is a hugely effective moment, because it's taking this canned thing that you're just used to doing as a video game thing and turning it around, because it's like, and this actually is having an impact.
As much of an action game as this is, it's very good at having... You can play this game for 20 minutes, half an hour without interacting with anyone else, whether that's humans or zombies. Like, the game really is good at letting that narrative breathe, and moments like you just explained, like, it's very good at saying, actually, this part of the game is much more about Joel and Ellie than it is about you taking out that zombie before it kills you, sort of thing. And it's like the game just has those moments where it is building that relationship, and the action is just playing a much secondary role to like what's going on. And Uncharted does this as well. Like there are slower moments that aren't combat focused that build on that narrative, but the biggest difference between this and Uncharted is it's just the plot feels like the stakes are just so much higher, and it
just strikes a very serious tone,
it's
right?
Incredibly serious.
Whereas like Uncharted is like Indiana Jones, it's like very pulpy, very actiony blockbuster. It's like a summer action flick, and there is cool emotional stuff that happens, but it's more animated and like cartoonish than Last of Us. And even like it's not to say that Uncharted 4 takes a tone that Last of Us did, but Uncharted 4 feels much more in the mold of a Naughty Dog that has made The Last of Us come off the back of that. It's like a bit more of a serious story in some senses.
I'm intrigued to play Uncharted 4 later this year. But like Last of Us, for example, you care so much about Joel and Ellie, and then every single character you meet on your journey, it's like, can I trust this character? Have they been bitten? Are they gonna turn? Are they actually a good guy, and I should really be trusting them because they can help me? And I'm not saying like you have any say over what happens narrative wise. It's a very linear plot. Like there's no choices to be made. But you're constantly on edge when you meet these characters because any of those things could happen. And there's some really interesting characters you meet along this journey, and it isn't all about just Joel and Ellie, but like the way that these characters are sprinkled throughout the narrative, I think added a lot to this game. Made it very intense. I still need to play the DLC. I'm looking forward to playing that in the next few weeks with Caroline. But I just think overall this package, I've not come away from a game feeling like this, honestly, since like finishing Breath of the Wild. And like that is...
Yeah, I was pretty stunned when you said that to me, because I was like, wow.
And it's not like a game I'm dying to go back and replay. I'd rather replay a game like Spider-Man or Horizon, and those are fantastic exclusive Sony titles, absolutely. But this game, I didn't come away from those games feeling the same way as I did about this game. And I can agree that like game-wise, sure, God of War, Spider-Man, Horizon are probably more my cup of tea. Like that's what I prefer. But as like an overall package that I'm going to think about, and you know, we're talking about last game of the decade is a thing going around a lot at the moment, and this game is coming up high on a lot of people's lists, and I'm totally there. Like I get it now. Like I understand why it is so hard, and it's not. Because I've listened for years of so many people saying, "Oh, Last of Us, it's so incredible! Like, you ought to try it sometime." And it was never top of my list when I got a PS4. There's a lot of stuff I played first, but I'm really glad to have played this game in the build up to Last of Us Part 2. And if you haven't played The Last of Us and you own like a PS4, PS3, or whatever, I would highly recommend playing it because it's an intense ride. I think it took me about 15 hours, but it's a pretty special game in my view.
Yeah, I just have always regarded Last of Us as like, it's very good story-wise. I've never thought of it as a game that I would want to play.
And I'm interested to hear your take when you play Last of Us 2, because I know there's a lot more emphasis there putting in that game on like stealth and the action.
Right,
and
yeah.
I'm sure elements will obviously feel like the first game, even if there are maybe a few more options and things. But so I'm intrigued to see what you think of that game.
I mean, I think it speaks to how good it is that I remember so much of it, right? Because like I watched a lot of Let's Plays back in the day, tons. Like in the same year that this came out, I also watched a Let's Play of BioShock Infinite. I barely remember BioShock Infinite compared to Last of Us, where I can pull a detail like that thing about Ellie sitting dejectedly as you have the ladder animation. Like there's a very small detail, and there are moments like I remember all the characters, I remember the beats of the story, everything that happened.
The pacing is incredible. Like it's very
maybe
memorable.
To some degree it's because that game just gets talked about a lot, and so over the years, you know, I have internalized a lot of it and still remember it. But I still only watched that game through once on YouTube, and I still know it pretty much inside out. So I think that probably speaks to how impactful it is generally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
It's cool. What else have you been playing, MBZ?
So there's been lots of things that I've been like going back and forth on, and so there's a game I'm playing at the moment that I'm not telling you about, and I don't know how long it's going to take me to finish it, and I'm jumping in and out of it.
I'm intrigued about this game. So I've played it.
No, you haven't. No.
I haven't. Okay, fair enough.
So I started Final Fantasy Tactics on Vita on PSP. And like, man, I really want to like Final Fantasy Tactics more than I do. It's not that it's a bad game, it's that it's slow to the point of frustrating and hard to the point of frustrating, in the sense that I wish that game got a remaster, because I think it would do it so much
Quite an old game at this point, right?
It's very old, but I'm actually playing a remaster of it, because I'm playing the PSP version of it. It was originally a PS1 game. The PSP version, though, War of the Lions, is infamous for having terrible slowdown on a lot of the animations, which at the start I was like, I can deal with this, but like as it went on and like the maps were getting longer and it was getting more difficult, and I was like, I can't do this, and like there's no way to skip through cutscenes when you've already replayed a mission. Sometimes like even placing your units poorly at the start is going to fuck you over. You pretty much have to do mandatory grinding just to get job classes so you can get skills that are good enough so you don't die. For me, I really want to play Final Fantasy Tactics. I just need a more modern version of it currently. It wasn't feeling like it was worth my time investment at the moment. But fundamentally, I think it's a very good game, and I appreciate why people love it so much. It's just like currently it wasn't my mood, and I wasn't willing to put the time into it. So I played like 8 hours of it. I'm putting it to the side for now. I'm hoping that I feel like there'll be a re-release soon at some point, even if there isn't. It's a game I will go back to.
You've
eventually.
given it a go, and that was what you intended to do.
Totally, and I do want to finish it eventually, but we'll wait on that. But then, like, randomly, I was like, oh, what else is on Switch? Oh, Dead Cells. I played that, and I just booted up Dead Cells. And here's what happened.
Very random.
I then got obsessed with Dead Cells in a way that I did not expect in any way. Okay, so you remember the end of 2018, and I think what was happening was we were playing some stuff to get ready for Game of the Year and talk about lots of different games.
We're covering some bases we'd missed throughout the year.
Yeah, I think it was a Black Friday sale on the American eShop, because the UK eShop didn't have the good games on sale. Essentially, the games that had come out that year that I wanted to play. So it was Valkyria Chronicles 4 and Dead Cells. 2 games that I really wanted to play because people were talking about them. Obviously, I'd love Valkyria Chronicles. I played it that year. And I picked both of them up on the US store. I went on a website. I found like a way to get a $50 eShop credit thing for America, and then just got them through there. And I ended up hardly playing much of either of them because it was kind of a cram thing at the end of the year. I played like 4 or 5 hours of Dead Cells. I played like 10, 12, maybe 15 hours of Valkyria Chronicles 4, and I just left it and haven't gone back to it. That's another game I do want to go back to and finish out. It's just, I think it was just the rush at the end of the year and trying to get things done and just not really focusing more on that as opposed to enjoying the games and taking the time with them. And I think Dead Cells back then was actually really hard. It was a game that I heard people talk about, and like people were very satisfied after they beat it because it was so challenging. But for me, it was like, okay, I keep going through these same levels. I keep dying on accident. I make one mistake, and all of a sudden I'm just fucked, and I just can't do anything about it. I just die, and I lose all my cells, and like I don't get much upgrades. And I go back to the start, and I'm like, okay, let's go through the first level again, get through the second level, and then I like die on the boss. I'm like, fuck, I don't. Like I was very dejected by it, and it wasn't really vibing with me. Apparently, I think the start of 2019, they patched the game to make it easier, essentially, and they just bumped up a bunch of the stats you can get going through. They toned down the enemy damage that happens to you, and just generally made it a more accessible thing. And I didn't realize this. I just kind of started playing it, and I was like, all right, let's see how far I can get. And on my third run, I beat the game. So I got through everything, beat all the bosses, got to the end, I was like, done.
How long does that take? Like 3 runs? Well, how long did your 3 runs take?
Well, one run, a successful run, when I was first starting out, was about an hour. It usually takes about an hour for a successful run. Okay. 55 minutes to an hour or so. And so I think my first run, I got to the first boss and died. And I was like, that was stupid. Like, I can do that better. Second run, I got to the final boss and died on my second run. And then the third run, I got there and beat the final boss. So
wow.
It was like, I was kind of confused because I was like, I remember this being harder than it was. And like, I know I had...
This is like that Jaguar boss that I beat in Guacamelee, yes. Where you're kind of like, how did you beat it?
Right, exactly. So I was a little confused because I was like, why was I just suddenly able to pick this game up now and beat it on my third try? It seemed a little too good to be true. And it turned out it was too good to be true because they had just toned it down, essentially. And the way they have now adjusted the game is that once you beat that boss for the first time, you get something called a boss cell, and you can then put the boss cell into this like tube, and then it modifies things, so it makes it so that enemies are more difficult to fight, and it makes it so that the health regen that you get at the end of each stage, sometimes it will be broken and you'll only have one health flask sitting there. So it just makes it so much more difficult without saying that that's the regular mode. And what I'll say is, like, the gulf in difficulty between regular and one boss cell is pretty enormous. Like, it is significantly harder when you switch over to the next version of it, because, like, that for me, so much of the crutch of it was getting to the end of the stage, not worrying about how many health flasks you've used, and then just refreshing all of them and getting your health back to maximum, essentially. And then you get through this one and you're like, oh no, I don't have any left, and there's only one here on the ground for you to pick up now, so it's going to make this next stage even more difficult. And I wish there was a bit of an in-between. I wish there was, like, apparently they are patching the original difficulty back into the game. I don't know if that's true or not. Someone on Twitter told me, but we'll see. And I hope that happens, because it would mean that there's, like, this middle ground, that, like, I've beaten it regular, now I want to go back and finish it off in a different way. And I think, so I don't know what it is, but, like, I really vibe with the movement and the controls and the fluidness of it. Just getting from...
That's weird, because that's the sort of aspect you'd imagine wouldn't have changed with the upgrade,
yeah,
you know?
Right, and I think it's because being more powerful, shredding through enemies a lot faster, means that you're able to move through the stage without feeling as stilted. What I mean by that is, like, often enemies would take so many hits that it wouldn't be worth going down there and taking them straight on with your normal weapons. There are two groups of weapons in Dead Cells. You have, like, your regular weapons, which are like a sword or a whip or an axe or a lance or whatever. And then you have your sub-weapons, which are kind of like traps, essentially. So you can have cleaver blades that you throw onto the ground, and they're just like blades that spin, and if enemies walk over them, they take damage. Or you have a turret that you pop down on the ground, and it shoots crossbow bolts out, and if you're close to it, then it will deal damage, essentially, to the enemy. So often what I would do, and I still do this quite a lot, and it's probably the most efficient way to beat the game, is to just throw down some turrets and just stand there as the turrets beat the enemies for you, which doesn't sound particularly fun, but when you're kind of conserving your health and trying to get through it, that is probably the safest way if you just want to play it safe. But the game obviously offers rewards for if you aren't playing it safe. So if you get through a level within 2 minutes, the first stage, then you unlock a door which has 20 cells in it, and so you get a bunch of rewards for either killing enemies without taking damage or getting through it faster. So it incentivizes you. And collecting cells is like it's a really cool loop, because you will have the currency to then unlock a bunch of stuff. The main thing I focused on to begin with, and I think this will help me with the first boss cell run, is health flasks. So the number of health flasks you have. There's a maximum of 4 that you can take in with you, and when you first start playing the game with just 1. So building that up and investing loads of cells into that helps a huge amount. But also you can just invest in different types of weapons. One of the weapons that I just got recently is the Castlevania style whip, and it feels amazing to use. It's just so fast and fluid, and if you hit them on the tip of the whip, it does like a crit. So it's all about the spacing between enemies and how fast you can hit them. There's a really good feeling roll, like just dodging out the way, killing enemies in quick succession, throwing your traps down on the ground, and just the pixel art animation, the way things die and all of it just explodes, just looks amazing. It can feel like a bit of a mess on the screen sometimes, but there's a joy to like everything being dead and just it cleaning itself up, essentially. It feels just fucking amazing. And the thing that has carried me through has been just upgrading a bunch of different things and unlocking new weapons. And every time you start, you get a random assortment of different things you can use. Like, here's an ice bow and here's some daggers. And they're like, okay, well, I'll just use these for however long, and maybe I'll find something better and swap out. But sometimes I just stick with what I started with, because you get used to using it on that particular run and you fall into a rhythm with it. And you're like, okay, this is how I'm going to approach every enemy. So It really is remarkable. And I think it's one of those games that you need to give it time. Like, you can't just bounce off it like I did. And obviously there are factors at play here in the sense that they did patch it and they have made the game a lot better. They've added a bunch of stuff to it, and just over the time of it started as an early access game, then it got released, and it's almost live service-esque, like in the sense that they constantly update it. There's a new update called the Rise of Giants that seems impossible because you have to beat the game with 5 boss cells. Basically meaning that in order to get another boss cell, I have to beat the game on 1 boss cell, then 2 boss cells, then 3. Like, every time you beat it on the higher difficulty, you get another boss cell to add. And so 5 to me sounds nightmarish, so I don't know if I will ever make it there. But what I was doing essentially was... So the thing is, I actually have gotten to the last level. I've gotten to the high castle on 1 boss cell, so I know I can do it. I know I can actually beat the game. But what I wanted to do before getting there is upgrade myself as much as possible. So now I have 4 health flasks, so I'm kind of maxed out. I wanted to go around and get all the movement upgrades, because there are a bunch of upgrades you get that allow you to access different routes through the game. It's not just a single linear path where you go level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, end.
But each level is like randomly generated.
Yes,
right?
So they all have the same theme, but they have a similar structure. It's just like the parts within that structure change, and the enemies are often different and things like that. The same types of enemies usually in each biome, but the way each thing is particularly set out is randomized. But every level feels similar in terms of its overall broad structure. So like the Promenade, which is the second place you get to, it has a bunch of areas where you have elevators down to subterranean parts. So that will always be the same, but the layout of it will be completely different every time you attempt it. So there's a familiarity, but it also is completely different every time you go through, while also having, you know, upgrade abilities like a thing where you can smash through the ground, like a ground pound essentially, that will break open areas. There is a kind of wall jump that you can use eventually. Lots of different things that will open up different paths through, and there are some sections that you can only access if you have those abilities. So a lot of my post-game stuff, like after I'd beaten it once, was going back through using a guide to be like, okay, where do I go to unlock the wall jump, essentially, and being like, okay, I need to take this path to the sewers instead, and from the sewers I need to take this other area. So there might be like 10, 12 different levels, even though one single run through is probably 7 or 8 of those. Maybe there's like 15 or so, but it seems like quite a lot more than you would expect. And at this point, I have all the movement upgrades. I've got maxed out my flasks. I've got a bunch of weapons I really like. And there's also, after you beat bosses, there's a guy who you can invest money into where it will increase the percentage chance of finding good items, so like legendary weapons and things like that, or higher quality items. So I think it builds itself in a way that there is a good progression to it, and the game does get easier as you go in terms of getting more powerful or having the ability to access things more easily. So I am just besotted with it. I think it is a phenomenal game, blown away by it. I can't stop playing it. It is just in hard rotation now. Dead Cells is just fucking incredible, and I didn't expect it to feel that way. It's the biggest turnaround I've had on a game since Xenoblade Chronicles, and I think it's one of those things, like, you take time away from it, you come back to it with a different mindset, and it completely changes your entire perspective. And that's great when that happens, because I don't think it really happens that often. And especially because on this show we tend to not do that. We just don't go back to games.
Yeah.
But also, I never really talked about Dead Cells on the podcast. So I was like, you know what? I am going to get deep into this now, because it is a game that's worth talking about. And I think that I think people should check it out. Absolutely. Like, it is in the best shape it's ever been. The Switch port is fantastic. Runs very smoothly, docked and undocked. Mainly been playing it handheld, but yeah, give it a shot for sure. I know, roguelikes and things like that. It's one of those things, over these last few years, I found roguelikes that speak to me. And I think it's not that I don't like roguelikes, it's just that most of them don't speak to me. Whereas, Into the Breach, Slay the Spire, Dead Cells, then now all these 3 games, they are this level of quality that I just can't ignore. And they are so fucking good that they overcome that idea of a roguelike, because the core gameplay loop just entices me to keep going. So
nice. Surprise of the year so far.
Probably, yeah.
Around January, but
shocked me.
Shocking.
Yeah, very, very cool.
Nice.
So that will close us out for the first segment. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after the break to talk about some of your emails.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the second segment of today's show. It is time for your listener emails and we are running low, as often happens. You've had your New Year celebrations, the parties are over, but now we're back to the grind. We need your emails, so please send them to ThisNintendoLife at gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife at gmail.com. Any comments, questions? There's a lot of news floating around. We would love to cover it. So our first email today is from Jovan, who's from the internet. Hi guys, I want to start off by saying I love the show. I love hearing you guys talk like friends, and your voices and smooth back and forth are great. I'm also from America, so getting a different perspective is interesting. The biggest compliment I can give you is that even when I'm absolutely disgusted with something you said, I still can't turn you off, since it's a pleasure listening to you. But some of your opinions just drive me absolutely bonkers. I think it's also an age thing, as I'm 36, but I have to get these off my chest. Super Mario Bros. Is 100% one of the best games ever made. 100%. A big problem with young people is that they didn't play these games how they are meant to be played. CRT. HD TVs have tons of lag that make these pixel-perfect games of old just plain hard to play. I play on a CRT and can speed run like no one's business. On an emulator through HD TV, I consistently mess up due to the lag. Makes the controls feel heavy and unresponsive when it's just not true. Oh, and that takes me to my next thing that drives me crazy. Mario 3 controls and old school Mario games have near perfect controls. You guys are either too young and got used to new style Mario controls that compensate for HD lag, or are judging the games based on emulators. This opinion nearly made me throw my phone out the car. Mario 3 is an absolute dream to control on a CRT and original hardware. Remember, emulators add lag, then the TV adds additional lag. These games were meant to be played on one-to-one CRTs. Last point here. I so disagree that Link's Awakening has bad design. I played this game as a kid and had no problem figuring things out. I think modern games are way too used to hint systems, maps that point the way, and other ways to cuddle the player. I understand that gamers have a million options and have zero patience to traverse the map and try and figure something out, but that has more to do with our current lifestyles than the game. The original Zelda had some obtuse shit for sure. Link's Awakening mostly avoids this. I mean, the rooster statue is in the center of town. The girl is singing the song she teaches you there. You get subtle hints, and any gamer with some patience will figure it out. It's not given to you, and patience runs thin in 2020, but it's more a product of our current environment, and saying the game has bad design because you as a gamer got used to something else is not fair in this case. The original Alien movie is really slow, and my wife hated it. She said it was too slow and boring compared to modern movies with fast cuts and faster pace. She couldn't take the time to let the movie sink in and appreciate the slow build-up tension. She wanted instant gratification and the answers to everything quickly. Guess the movie sucks then, right? Anyways, my first email, and I know it's crazy long, but as a long-time listener and first-time writer, I had tons to get off my chest. Love the show, but also hate it at times, lol.
Well, lots to unpack there.
Well, I'm glad Robin's wife is having similar similar concerns.
Yeah.
With Alien,
Okay, so there's a lot of things to address here, of course. I think that, we have opinions that often people who grew up with different games have different opinions on. And for me, that's just the case with everybody, right? The reason... Now, I get it. You definitely feel like you have an objective opinion on Mario and Mario 3 and Link's Awakening, but you don't. Your opinion is 100% clouded and judged by nostalgia, and it always will be. And I understand that's the case for us as well with certain games. So in many ways, sure, you can argue like about objectivity and about things not being bad, but the reason that you feel that way is because of the environment in which you first played it in, which will therefore lend to how you feel about it later on in life. For me, in terms of stuff like Mario 3, like I've played that game on the Switch NES thing. I've played it on Wii U Virtual Console. I played it on modern systems where it is available. I've also played the Mario 3 version in Mario Maker. And the controls for Mario 3 in Mario Maker feel better to me. They just do. It just feels like a more refined, tighter version of that game. And that's not to say it's better or worse. It's what I prefer. And preference and what we like is... I think it's implicit. Now, here's one of the problems with opinions and what people say on podcasts. Everything I say is my opinion, right? So me saying Octopath Traveler fucking sucks means I think Octopath Traveler fucking sucks. I don't feel the need to say I think before everything I say, because it should be implied that everything I say is what I think, right? Yeah. Because there is no objectivity. Objectivity does not exist when it comes to opinions, because everyone is different and everyone comes at things.
Yeah, and even like Metacritic is a metadata of a series of opinions. That's not to mean all those opinions are right or wrong. That's just metadata of a series of opinions that most people in the critical sphere think that this game is better than that game. That doesn't mean it necessarily is better than that game. It's purely opinion.
It is purely opinion, which is why it's obviously like our opinions will drive you insane because they're different. But for me, I think a lot of that is interesting to me. So when obviously Giant Bomb was doing their Game of the Year stuff in 2017, Jeff Gerstmann fucking hated Breath of the Wild, and he was just going in on it. And I love that. I love that he has this different perspective from me, that things that bothered him, I had no issue with. And for me, it's always interesting to go by what someone, once you understand what someone's thoughts are, what their perspective are, it gives you the ability to say, okay, if that person really hates this thing, maybe I'll like it, right? Like Dan Reichert didn't like Ori, and he doesn't like Hollow Knight. Like, there are some of these games that I have loved in the last few years, and so those types of Metroidvanias, like if he ends up being like, oh, I don't like it, then it might be a thing that I will like, and vice versa. It kind of just depends on, interpreting what someone else has thought and therefore kind of taking your own feelings from there.
Yeah, totally. And we've talked a number of times on the show about how when IGN's top games of all time, often Mario Bros does very well, Super Mario World, these games, and I've always just taken a step back and said, like, that implies that the 2D platformers that came after these games are not as good as these games, and like I constantly do believe that we are, as Vinny on Giant Bomb always says, like, we are living in the best era of games right now. Games are getting better, not worse, and some games have aged better than others, but ultimately the games we're playing today are better than the games we were playing yesterday, and that trend has continued and kept going for, in my view, the last 20 years. And I think that, yes, there are some incredible games from 20 years ago, but if I made a top 100 list as you've just done, MBZ, I think the vast majority of the games in that list for me would be from the current decade. And I think that was the case with your list as well. And like, that's just
largely.
And I think that's because games do evolve, films evolve, music evolves, like the games evolve as well, and it's a case of, like, I'd be interested, Jovan, in what your views were on some of the more modern 2D platformers that were perhaps inspired by the Marios and things, like your views on a game like Celeste, Super Meat Boy, these kind of a more modern take on a 2D platformer, because in my view, like, they are doing something different and better than those original games, and
they wouldn't exist without those original games.
Exactly,
but the medium has moved on since then, right?
Right, exactly.
Like, and I don't think it's healthy to maintain the idea that there is nothing better than the original Super Mario Brothers, because everything is better than the original Super Mario Brothers from my perspective. But again, that's my perspective. That's how I feel about the world.
Exactly.
I also think that Metroid Fusion is the best Metroid game. Most people won't think that, right? It's just, we all have our own opinions, and I think that it's, sure, it can be frustrating when you listen to someone's who isn't the same as yours, but I think that's kind of the joy of, listening to other opinions. It's like that you get a wider perspective.
And I think it's interesting comparing Jovan as you have to like to Alien, and like, so I haven't actually seen Alien. There's loads of classic films I've not seen. From what I've heard, Alien in many ways does hold up pretty well and is considered a classic.
Sure. I mean, I watched it. I found it pretty boring.
Right.
But also that's like our perspectives are going to be different because I have a certain taste in movies that is very weird. And I think both of us are, we like the prequels of the Star Wars trilogy.
Sure. But without knowing much about films, in my view, as an industry, the video game industry has come far further in the last 20 years than the film industry, in my view. Like, I think a lot of people might share that view. And if you actually look at like the very first like filmmaking, that was the kind of era and like that strong, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say when films changed very quickly and had constant evolutions, that's kind of the period we are in right now with video games, or we certainly have been in the last decade.
Films were much more established and haven't changed as much since Alien to today versus how video games have changed since Super Mario Brothers to today.
Right, exactly. So I think that comparison, it is important to note that there are much faster changes happening in this industry than the film industry, and that's reflected by the amount of money going into the industry and the number of new developers. The fact that like the whole industry might switch to streaming in the next decade, like we don't know, but the next generation of consoles are this year, and so far we know that Xbox and PlayStation have very different trajectories on what they see the next generation being, and I think that's going to be another turn that'll affect the industry tremendously. And Nintendo do their own thing, and that's cool, and the Switch in itself is kind of revolutionary in many ways. But I just think if an industry that is moving so crazy fast to say that Mario Brothers 3 is the pinnacle, I think we should demand more of our games. We should demand more of video game development, and I personally think we are there, and we have seen more from video game development. So yeah, really appreciate your question. Well, your statement, Jovan.
So the other thing I just want to bring up is that he constantly brings up, well, in 2020 this and in 2020 that, and that's the point. We don't live in 1995 or 1990 when these games came out.
Yeah.
We live in 2020. So you can't judge games by those standards because you don't live then right now. I'm playing Link's Awakening in 2019. That's how I'm going to judge it in 2019. Yeah. There's no point in me judging it in 1995 because that's not the time in which I exist. So a critique of Link's Awakening as if it was 1995 right now is pointless because no one lives in 1995. They live in 2019/2020. So we have to critique these games as we live currently because that's the way we exist and that's how we consume media. And so it kind of, to me, there's no way in which to objectively critique things by going back to them as if we were, back then, because things were different back then. You were younger, you were less experienced, you had different perspectives on things, and throughout the years those perspectives will change. Some things you'll keep the same and some things you won't, and you'll have nostalgia for things, but ultimately if you watch Alien today and your wife got bored with it, that's fine, or that makes sense, because in 2020 maybe it is a movie that's boring to someone from that perspective, and that's okay. You can live with that. You can't just say, guess the movie sucks, because there is no objective quality for taste, right? I guess Love Island is the best TV show ever made because most people watch it, right? Like, that's just not how people judge things, because there's so much media out in the world, so many people can love and hate so many different things, that there really is zero way to say, well, actually, you have a wrong opinion, this is the right opinion. That's just not how life works. So I feel like that's my ultimate takeaway here is, I appreciate that you love Super Mario Brothers. That's great. I'm so happy you love Super Mario Brothers and you think Link's Awakening has an incredible game design. I don't think that. And that's fine to disagree. So there you go.
Totally. Thank you very much for the email, and we look forward to your reply.
Sure.
Our next email is from Ardem. Hi guys, firstly, thanks for reading my email on the show. Your advice was really appreciated. I decided that the best way I can keep myself both sane and happy is to not stress over what I might be missing. Instead, I'm just going to play what I feel like when I can, regardless of what everyone is talking about or doing. I'm much happier this way. Now on to my new question. I was wondering what you considered would be the best option for a secondary game platform aside from the Switch. Is it a mighty PC, an Xbox with Game Pass, or PS4 with all their exclusives? What about the future generations coming this year? Are you guys planning on getting either the new Xbox or PlayStation or even Google Stadia? Thanks again for the great podcast. This time writing on a train on my way to work in Hong Kong. All the best, Erdem.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's interesting because there is it's basically a reset in 2020. There are new platforms coming from Sony and Microsoft.
How do they always come at the same time? Do they bounce off each other purposefully, or is it kind of accidental? Or
I think it's driven by. I think it's mainly driven by third party, right? Like, because
that makes sense.
They have to have similar styles of games on both their platforms. Like Assassin's Creed has to be able to run on both the next Xbox and PlayStation, and Activision, Ubisoft, they'll have a lot of sway with these big companies, so they'll constantly be in communication with both companies, and as a result, and I'm sure each one has ways of finding out what the other is doing in some sense,
and that implies that one of them has been slightly cajoled into either being a bit early or a bit late,
right?
But,
yeah. And it's been different in the past. Like Microsoft went a year before Sony with the 360, so it has been out of sync before.
And that was the generation that they kind of won as well, like when they were out of the box first. So
yes, absolutely. It was also because Sony just royally screwed up with the PS3 and everything surrounding it. But there are a lot of options, right? And I think it kind of depends on what types of video games you like playing. And how much disposable income you have to spend on something. For me, if you had all the money in the world and there was no issues whatsoever, my easy answer is PC. For a simple reason. The upfront cost of a PC is very high. That's clear, and that is something you can't really get over. If you want a good PC, you're going to have to pay a lot of money for it. However, once you have a PC, you get access to pretty much everything outside of Sony first-party games. And a lot of these things...
Nintendo first party as well.
Well, this is implying that you own a Switch already.
Okay, sorry, right.
So just as a secondary platform, you get games showered on you. For free, for cheap. It's the easiest access in terms of services and people putting things on sale. You will always get the best bang for your buck on PC versus any other platform. And it's just more accessible and easier to use. Obviously, it's a PC as well, so it has a bunch of different other things you can do with it. And that's like it's a multimedia device. It's not just, it doesn't have one singular focus. But for me, it is absolutely the obvious one. And he brings up Xbox with Game Pass. PC also has Game Pass. Now, the Game Pass isn't quite as good as the Xbox one in terms of its number of games or some of the things that come, like Devil May Cry 5 and GTA 5 are on Xbox, but they're not on PC Game Pass. So you're not maybe getting as great stuff, but you'll get all the Xbox exclusives. You'll get everything else that comes to PC, and you also get the types of games on PC that you can't play on console. So stuff like Civilization or StarCraft or any kind of real-time strategy, CRPGs, stuff like Disco Elysium. That stuff will always come to PC first. A lot of indies will come to Switch and PC at the same time, which means that obviously you can make a choice there. For me, it's the obvious one to go for outside of thinking about taste, right? Because when you come to taste, the reason Bally bought a PS4 over an Xbox One is because of the Sony exclusives. They're the types of games that he wanted to play that speak to him. And so that's the direction you went in versus
totally.
Any other.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it wasn't just the Sony exclusives, because obviously the PS4 I could play games like Tomb Raider, Jedi Fallen Order, like these third-party cross-platform games that if you only own a Switch, you can't play. I mean, obviously we have like Witcher 3 and crazy games like that now coming, but they've tended to come a little bit more delayed, or they're down-resed, or there's a benefit to playing them on like something that's not a Switch. So, but because I'm not that into visual fidelity, frame rates in games, as your MBZ, like I'm totally up for playing a game like Jedi Fallen Order on a console versus you playing it on the PC, and where it seems to have run a bit better, even though it still has had its faults. So, as you said, for me, there's a quality with some of those Sony first-party games and a lot of them kind of came like in that 2018 area where you did have like God of War and Spider-Man with just a few months of each other, and I thought, right, that's my time to get on this train, because those are two of my favorite games of all time in many ways. Like, they're both incredibly good games, and obviously the Uncharted series. I've just played Last of Us. I'm a big fan of Horizon, but like there's a level of quality with those games, and it's that kind of third person action, sometimes open world, sometimes not more story driven games that I've just massively gotten into since summer 2018. And if that's your cup of tea, I do think that Sony in many ways are the best in the business at that type of game, as much as I think Breath of the Wild is another fantastic one of those. But if you want lots of experiences like that, those Sony exclusives do kind of hit it out of the park in many ways. So on top of that, with games like Ori coming to Switch and etc., like I'm feeling like there's very few games.
That's the question in the air, isn't it? Is like, where is Microsoft putting their games? And if we have repeats of the kind of stuff with like Cuphead being a Mii costume in Smash Brothers now, like the consistent push that we're seeing from Microsoft to be on every platform possible, be agnostic, and just hope that people subscribe to Game Pass and use xCloud. Is there a future in which Halo comes to Switch, and then you don't even need to worry about Xbox in any sense?
And even from a value perspective, I think if you went out tomorrow and bought a Switch and a PlayStation 4, I think that is very much on the cheaper end of what's available in terms of like Xbox One, PC, consoles to come. Like, those are two consoles that are much on the cheaper end, and you can still access, obviously, all the Nintendo games, all the Sony exclusives, and almost all the indie games on top of, like, the third-party AAAs like the Jedi Fallen Orders, etc. So I think if you are more like me and you're not into PC building, and because as you say, MBZ, it is better value getting a PC if you're playing an absolute ton of games. But obviously you're missing out on the Sony first parties. And I personally think that if I'm playing 3, 4, 5 new games a year that are AAA, that are going to cost me like 40, 50 quid, then I want them to be very high quality, meaty experiences. And I think the PlayStation 4 offers the most of those in a given year on average in the last, say, 5.
Right. It's also worth thinking about like what types of games that are Nintendo style games that you will get more often on a different platform. And it tends to be that Sony have sweeped up a lot of the Japanese exclusives. Like, you can only play Persona on PlayStation. You can only play Yakuza. Well, Yakuza is now moving other places. It's coming to Xbox now. But it used to be Nier Automata, Yakuza, all those series. Sony had kind of wrapped up a lot of Japanese style games that, Xbox didn't really do well with. And like, it's been so long that Microsoft have tried to break into the Japanese market. They've constantly failed to. I don't think they ever will, honestly. But that's another avenue to think about is, do you like that type of game as well? Because, it'll be more similar to something that Nintendo makes versus, other stuff. So it's another way to kind of think about it. But the plans for getting them next year, Bally, what's your plans? Are you planning on getting any of these consoles, or?
There are too many sequels to all those incredible Sony exclusives for me to look anywhere else, to be honest. And that's a very fanboyish thing to say, but there's going to be sequels to Horizon, Spider-Man, God of War. Might be something new in Uncharted. Might be like Last of Us 3 by the end of the console cycle. Who knows? But like, I think there's just a lot of awesome Sony stuff. We got like Dreams coming this year. I'm kind of intrigued by that. So I'm kind of on the Sony train. I got on in 2018. I've not gotten off yet. I can't deny that Game Pass is a fantastic deal. But ultimately it's about the games. I just think Sony have those games. And so I'm actually keen to get a PS5 day one because I just want to be part of that journey from the off.
Even if it has like no real exclusives to care about on day one? Even if like it's Assassin's Creed and some other rubbish.
See, Assassin's Creed would be enough for me because I've not played an Assassin's Creed since Black Flag. I know that the series has changed enough. If there's no Assassin's Creed, maybe there's something else I can get behind, but I still think there's an outside chance there will be a Horizon Zero Dawn sequel. I know it's unlikely, but I think there's a chance. And I think honestly I'd be happy with just Assassin's Creed and buying a PS5 day one, just to see what that experience is like. But that's where I'm at. I know that you're thinking about PCs and thinking about PS5 a little down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't buy a PS4 day one, and it was mainly because I looked at the lineup and I was like, there's nothing here worth my time. Most of this stuff I can play on PC already, and my PC is already more powerful than a PS4 is, so there was no reason for me to get it for The Order 1886 or Killzone Shadowfall or Knack, or even when Bloodborne came out, I didn't care about Souls games, so it was really when Uncharted 4 hit in 2016 that I was like, okay, now I'll get one. But until that big exclusive that I want to play that comes out happens, there's really no reason for me to pick one up. And I can play majority of the stuff with Switch and PC, and it is, for me, that is the most beautiful dream of this generation, is Switch plus PC. You get the best of both worlds, and it is kind of covers every single base that isn't the Sony exclusives. So I've been waiting to upgrade my PC for a while. Last time I upgraded was I got a new graphics card in 2015, and we're at a point now where
for the last CD Projekt Red game.
Yes, Cyberpunk is coming. It used to be the case that when Crysis came out, that's when you would upgrade your graphics card. Crysis used to be the big benchmark for PC, and now it seems like any CD Projekt Red game is the new benchmark. So as soon as Cyberpunk happens in September, that's when I would like to have a new setup done, which would be like a 4K monitor and an RTX card that does ray tracing, and like something that I can have that best experiences that game for me. So that's kind of my plan at the moment. I don't plan on getting a PS5 until they put something I care about on it, which could be a while. So who knows? We shall see. But yeah.
Thanks very much for your email, Erdem. That's a good talking point on some other systems, which we don't always get to. But that's all we've got time for emails. As I said at the top of the segment, please send your emails into ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We are running low. We would hugely appreciate some questions, some comments, some things to read out on the show. But we will join you in the third segment after this musical interlude, where we're going to be talking about some of the video game news. Be right back.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show for our last segment, in which we are going to be discussing a bunch of different news that has happened. Lots of Nintendo early year news, kind of getting things started. I think we're all in this holding pattern for when is the next regular Nintendo Direct, right? Like, that's the thing. It's like, all right, it's is it February crew? Are you January crew? What are you expecting? What are you kind of feeling for the rest of the year? And I think a lot of the news that we've got so far at the start of this year has been catch up on 2019, or just like, let's just finish off some of these hanging threads from last year and the big games of last year, essentially. So I don't know what your thoughts are, Bally, whether the regular Nintendo Direct is going to come next month, or if we still have a chance for it to be late January.
I think there's a decent chance of late January, but I'd probably feel safer saying it's probably start middle of February, I think, and it doesn't really matter when it comes, I guess. But I think I definitely think it's got to come. They've fairly consistently done one almost every single year since they started directs. So
absolutely, and you think about the lay of the land for this year. We have 0 release dates outside of Animal Crossing. We have a few games that are floating in the ether. We've got Bayonetta 3, No More Heroes 3. We have obviously Breath of the Wild 2. No one knows whether there's anything happening with that. So I think just need a bit of clarification on what is their lineup looking like for the rest of this year, and I think that is probably coming soon. But there's a lot of news that's happened recently. Some interesting stuff overall. A lot of it kind of DLC focused. And let's kick it off with the one that literally just happened, and we're recording pretty much as soon after the fact as possible. The final Smash DLC character for the first round of the Fighters Pass was announced, and it's Byleth. It's another sword anime character from Fire Emblem Valley. I think we're under the impression now that Sakurai either master troll or just like too big of a Fire Emblem fan and just needs to have every main character from a Fire Emblem game in it, even though the main characters are always the most boring and terrible from not only design perspective, but a character. Like, Byleth is not a fucking character. It's an avatar for the player. And I get that, like, they're trying to mix things up and be like, oh, well, we'll put in the axe and the lance and the bow representing Claude and Edelgard and Dimitri. But really, it's just like, well, you know, I'd rather they put Edelgard in this game and just stuck to that instead. To have it a little bit different, and it's annoying. I don't share what a lot of people's frustrations are, which is like, oh, another Fire Emblem character, because I'm a Fire Emblem fan, right? Like, I like the series. I appreciate how much representation it gets in Smash Brothers. But that said, I would much rather have a Pegasus Knight in the game, or an axe user, or a lance user. Like, and I understand, yes, there are different movesets. Corrin is completely different to Roy, who is completely different to Ike, who's completely different to Byleth. Obviously, their movesets differ, but I feel like perception-wise, just from the character, like looking on the character screen, they're just not very interesting looking characters, a lot of them. And there are really good designs in the Fire Emblem series. Like Petra is a great example from Three Houses, or even Edelgard, who is distinct and different. And I just wish they had gone down that route from a Lord perspective. How do you feel about it, Bally?
It's even referenced in the sort of reveal with it. It's the character called Sothis, and she says...
Like, that's kind of self-troll, and, like, Sakurai openly winking at the audience, being like, oh no, it's another sword character. It's like, it's one of those types of things I dislike the most, which is point out the thing that's a problem, continue to do the thing anyway.
Yeah, I know.
You know? Like, fucking don't do that,
Nintendo
please.
have done that a few times with different things, like joking about, when's Mother 3 coming? And it's like, oh yeah, it's still not here. Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Yeah, overall, it's disappointing. I think the majority of Smash Brothers fans, I think there are many Fire Emblem fans who are probably disappointed in some aspects, as you say, where it's another sword user. Is it maybe even the fact that intelligent systems often go with like the sword, like the avatar character is often a sword user? If the avatar character had to be, say, a Pegasus Knight, would that make it any more likely that Sakurai had a Pegasus Knight in the game, or is he keen on having the avatar in the game? Right.
Well, yes, I think 100%, because it's always about the protagonist, right? And you look at, I don't know, it's interesting, because Pokemon seems to be a different example of this. Obviously, they lean towards starter Pokemon, but in recent eras, like, is Incineroar the one you would pick out of that lineup to be, that's the most iconic from this generation? Not necessarily. I think from Sakurai's perspective, it's all about... Okay, here's the thing, right? I feel like Sakurai's perspective on Byleth is actually more in terms of, I like a lot of things about Three Houses. I want to incorporate all of them, but I can't make Edelgard and Dimitri and Claude, all three playable in this game. So what I'm going to do as a compromise is I'm going to put a lot of their moveset into this avatar character, which allows you to get a flavor of those characters while also just containing it to one. And then also, I do think that those costumes are really good. Like, I was like, oh wow, the Dimitri one looks really like Dimitri, and the Edelgard one has a good resemblance. The only problem is Claude, because Claude is not white, and so it's just reads a bit weird.
It's very weird.
So aside from that, I think that they do a good job in terms of using the costumes to simulate being a different character. But of course, it's never going to be the same as having the exact same character. And you see that with the Mii costumes, right? Because they're like Cuphead, and it's like, great, Cuphead.
It's like, whoa.
I wish that was a real character as opposed to stupid
dude from Assassin's Creed. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like,
Crazy
like I like those
crossovers.
nods. Smash Bros. Has always been about references, but ultimately I don't think that the Mii characters are interesting to fight with, and I don't really like their movesets that much.
No.
So it just dissuades me. The only reason I would buy, say, Sans from Undertale or Cuphead is because those two characters have soundtrack songs associated with them, and so you get those songs in the rotation of the game, which I don't think I bought the Sans one. I should get that for Megalovania and also just pick up Cuphead at the same time. So I'll probably do that when I pick up the second expansion pass. But, you know, I do enjoy Sakurai's history lessons. It was kind of a thing where I was like, well, look, most people know what Fire Emblem is now. I could understand if this was 2005 and the first game had only just come out on GBA, and you're like, well, this game in the Japan, and there's been 17. And then for some reason, he started teaching us how to count in binary on his hands. And I'm
that
like,
was so funny.
What the fuck is this man?
With two hands, you can count up to 1031 or something.
Yeah, I think it's 1023, and I was like, "What, Sakurai? What are you on? Like, you're insane!" I love it. He's such an interesting, quirky character, and I think I do appreciate the kind of the audience. It's almost like he's a talk show host, and he just has a laughing audience watching him as he goes through.
Is it an actual audience, or is it tinned laughter?
No, I think it is an actual audience. Yeah.
Okay.
Apparently, he's trying to emulate. So there's a game show in Japan called Game Center CX, which is this guy Arino who plays through hard video games, and it's a lot about having an audience and things like that, like laughing as he does it, and he fails at it. They actually made a DS game about that, which I've tried a while ago, and it's like kind of mini game collection based on like kind of rip-offs of NES games. It's a very interesting thing. RFN have talked about it in the past. Anyway, that's all to say that Sakurai is a madman and continues to be so, and I do like this format. I think that it's kind of one of those things that there are YouTubers out there who do breakdowns of characters, and it's like Sakurai's out here being like, look, I made this, I can do that instead, which is to some degree a little bit putting people out of a job, but you know, that's fine.
I think more widely, I think it's thanks to Sakurai we're essentially so spoiled on what's already been revealed that what would have been a pretty decent reveal maybe a couple of years ago is now like, oh no, another sword user from Fire Emblem.
Yes, right. But I think because the bar is so high now, the expectation is so high that a lot of people are like, well, you know, I need the world.
So it's important to step back and be thankful for what we have.
Oh, I'm absolutely. To be quite honest with you, I couldn't care less who this last character was because I've already got everything at this point. Like I don't have any more dreams or expectations. Like everything is gravy. So I'm like, sure, I'll take Edge of Dawn as a soundtrack thing. I'll listen to that non-stop. Of course I will. And you know, I have investment in who the Smash Brothers characters are, but I'm not really going to get antsy about it, and I think a lot of people on the internet right now are very angry, and I'm like, it's like this game is
who is
given us
Smash Brothers that isn't already resonating with
right,
you, that you're
like
kinda,
it's
there's already
we're running
so
out of
many
things. So fair enough for Nintendo for kind of doing a co-marketing thing here, because there's the Fire Emblem expansion pass that got announced alongside this, which is like, okay, so let's sell more people on Fire Emblem Three Houses by putting this character into the game.
Before we move on to the expansion pass, though, I do think it always sweetens the deal when there's a character that comes out and people are a bit disappointed that we know that there's still 6 characters to come.
Exactly, and then they announce like, okay,
total
here's
crazy.
A bunch more characters, and Sakurai was like, well, initially I was going to do 2 or 3, and then I was like, in my head, I'm like, well, Nintendo told them to do more than that, didn't they? Because they understand how big a deal these are.
Oh, I like that he said they've already been decided and we're working on them. So yes, you can tweet at me, but it probably won't be incorporated.
No, it 100% will not be incorporated.
He could have said 100% will not be incorporated, but said something along the lines of probably won't.
Yeah, I don't know. But the thing for me that right, here's the thing, okay? Think about this from Nintendo's perspective. Would you rather put a blow your mind out character at the end of this pack and then get people not that interested in the new one? Or would you rather put in a character that's like, fine, people aren't going wild about it, and then save a bigger gun to be the first reveal of your new DLC pack? Because my running theory here is that they had decided on the 5 characters of DLC that they would do for this first pack, and all of them were third-party fighters, all of them mind-blowing. Reggie said as much about this straight to Keeley's face at the Game Awards, which is like, all the characters we're doing for this pass, they're going to be characters you wouldn't expect to see in Smash Brothers out of nowhere. Along the line, Nintendo realized how fucking powerful this campaign has been, and decided that let's take that third-party character who could have been this big final character that was going to blow people's minds, let's roll that into the second expansion pass instead, and give them a pass with Byleth. Because at this point, most people will have bought this expansion pass already, and it means that everyone's just going to download Byleth regardless. They're just getting this character. It's smarter for them, from a marketing perspective, to be like, hey, let's save back maybe that big explosive character and open strong with our second set of DLC, because it will be a strong gambit to get people to just download the entire thing. And obviously, they don't necessarily need to do that, because there are so many people invested in Super Smash Brothers that they'll buy it sight unseen. Sakurai also said the same thing. It's like, I'm sorry, we can't tell you what it is, but please do buy it anyway. And I appreciate that, but also it's clear that as soon as Joker was announced, people were like, oh fuck, I need to get this whole pass now, because all of this is going to be like this.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be the case, essentially.
No, I totally agree. And I think the one thing that I just really hope is that the final character is truly ultimate and is truly just the most out the park kind of, no one predicted kind of character. So I would hope that the final character is kind of that big, and then, as you say, like, scatter the big characters throughout the next 6. They don't, obviously not all 6 are going to be absolute, Joker level.
No, and you can't do that, right? Like, you had Joker and Banjo-Kazooie, who I think were the most mind-blowing ones of this iteration. You had a really niche hardcore character with Terry Bogard, and you had a big Japan crowd pleaser with the Dragon Quest hero. And then obviously Byleth just is, again, it's just more marketing for Fire Emblem, upping the brand name, blah, blah, blah. So I think overall, when I look back on the expansion pass, I'm very, very happy with it, the Fighters totally. Pass. I think it's really good, and I have enjoyed playing as all the characters, and all of them, as Sakurai mentioned, have completely different gameplay mechanics. I love how detailed and obviously this has been a case since like the very beginning with Smash Brothers, but the amount of care and attention to detail that goes into every aspect of these characters is just marvelous to wonder. And he's just, this man, he said at the end, he's like, well, I guess I'm going to keep working hard. Yeah. And I'm like, this man has not stopped working.
He says with the bags under his eyes, just like going for year upon year.
Yeah, and that's the ultimate curse that he's stuck with, is Nintendo now have this game, which is, and also he was trying to downplay the fact that it was the best-selling fighting game ever. He's like, well, if you count the 25 ports of Street Fighter 2 and all this, and he almost has so much reverence.
I wouldn't even call it a fighting game.
Right, exactly. But he almost has so much reverence for other classic fighting games that he's like, no, we can't be bigger than them, almost. So he's a very humble guy. I appreciate that about Sakurai. Yeah. So good stuff.
It all comes across so well, and regardless of the fact that it's another sword user from Fire Emblem, like, the whole presentation is top notch. The stage looks great. The music is obviously great. People have already been too spoiled on what we've already got. We've got 6 more fighters to come, which is already more than anyone had ever been promised, and it's just good upon good. And this is one little blip, perhaps, in the overall scheme of how impactful each announcement is. But you just kind of have to. It's important in the video game industry in general to always step back and think, where are we at and how did we get here? And, don't look at each announcement in isolation, because I think it's important that companies do think in terms of the wider picture. And as you say, there was probably a very hot fighter lined up for this slot, and Nintendo said, wait, save them for the next one, as you said, and let's do a bit more marketing for this one.
Yeah, and look, I will pay for whatever. I am too deep in with Smash Brothers at this point. Totally. I'm going to buy it.
I'm not that affiliated to any of these characters, and I'm still really keen on that fighter pass. I think it was good value. I've not even played a couple of the characters, but I've still had a blast with like the few characters I have used when we played online together and stuff. And yeah, it's great fun. I'm well on the Smash train.
Absolutely. So overall, pretty good. We'll see what the future holds. And I wonder how long it will take for them to kind of roll back around, because there's been no details about here's the start date for this pass, here's the end date. I wonder if that's a thing they wait until E3 or if it's as close as, say, March or April where they start talking about it again and kind of keep Smash Brothers in the news cycle. And I think part of the reason Smash Brothers at the Game Awards was able to win stuff like Best Fighting Game was because of the Fighters Pass. Like, because Smash Brothers had been in the news constantly throughout 2019, it made it so that a game that was technically a 2018 game still got its due credit in a big award show like that.
Question.
Which was, yes.
Will those 6 fighters truly be the end of Ultimate, or is there going to be another pass at the end of the Switch's life cycle?
Man, it's so hard to say, because I think that, yes, would Nintendo want this to keep generating stuff for endlessly? Probably. But I don't know where we're going to be. I mean, it
depends where Smash Brothers is in 8 years, you know? Like, we don't really know. If it is truly the ultimate form and they're not going to remake or do anything Smash Brothers related for a considerable time afterwards, which I think is possible.
Like, to be honest with you, this version of Smash Brothers, they could just re-release this version throughout the end of time, and I think people would be fine with it. Like, it just is the ultimate one. It has every character, stage.
Yeah, bring it into 4K, up-res it, you know.
Totally,
give it a good
if you have another Switch, you can just put out this game again with all the DLC people included in it, and then start again and start adding even more DLC characters.
Well, that's also true, but yeah, that kind of makes me think there will be like a third pack of DLC, and they will just kind of keep the train going. And then when a sequel Switch does come out, we've not really discussed what comes after the Switch a ton on the show, but say it is a case of NES to SNES and we are in a similar position, then as you say, they could just do like a Mario Kart 8 Deluxe kind of pack on that next Switch.
Yeah, absolutely. We shall see. Cool, let's move on to the next thing, which came alongside the Byleth announcement, which was the expansion pass for Fire Emblem Three Houses, which I think looks pretty great, honestly. It's another house, and it's apparently they're underground, so they lived underneath the castle the whole time, apparently. It's going to be some stupid story.
Link to Breath of the Wild 2 in some way.
Oh, exactly, yeah, I know. There will be some weird justification for it.
They kept all the best looking people underground.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Like, boy, they just, Nintendo going out their way with the waifus and the husbandos in this pack. I'll tell you what, they're like, Jesus, do you want some anime? Here's some goddamn anime for you. And I like all the character designs. They look fantastic. And it seems like, I don't know, so they're calling it a side story. So I don't know that means it's going to be a full-blown fifth path, technically, because there are already 4 paths in the game. It's a 4th house, and I wonder how much like additional stuff there will be, because it looked like in the trailer, to my eye, that one of the characters was riding a black Pegasus and cast magic. And I don't believe there's a magic casting Pegasus class. I could be wrong. In the sense that I didn't use that many Pegasus units when I played Three Houses, so I wonder if you can just do that and there is the ability. But there is a specific class in Awakening that's the Dark Flyer class that's specifically a black Pegasus with magic. That is that class, right? So I imagine that could be a thing where they add new classes in. It seems like the dude with the giant abs is wearing some weird gauntlets. They look like potentially like the relics. So, you know, the like legendary weapons that Byleth is using in Smash Brothers, like the axe, the lance, and the bow.
Version of those.
It's kind of like a grappler like version of those, because I believe there wasn't really a relic for grapplers in the base game. So that probably makes sense. And yeah, they all look like interesting characters. I'm very much down with this, especially if there are new classes, because one of my favorite things about Three Houses was being like, okay, I want to have everyone be a certain class and like use all these different classes, and I hope that they kind of add some more stuff there. It's coming out very soon, February 13th, so that's kind of their February slot to some degree. At least they have some major...
It's very close to the Wargroove DLC.
Yeah, that's funny. I feel like we'll both be talking about different things come that time of year, but it will be a good time for strategy fans in general, I think, which is good to see. So yeah, that's going to be very soon. That's less than a month away. So I'm excited to do that. And
what do you think of the price? I think it's like £23.
Yeah, it's fine. I think there's been a bunch of other stuff with this. This is kind of like the Xenoblade expansion pass, or even the Breath of the Wild one, where they had a bunch of stuff that came before the big major piece. This is kind of how Nintendo have been doing their DLC, is, here's some t-shirt for buying it, here's like a bunch of stuff, extra stuff, which is like the hard mode in Breath of the Wild, and then the the kind of, I can't remember the name of the area, but it was like you go through 50 floors or whatever, the Cave of Ordeals style area, and then finally the last piece of the pack is the major story expansion, which in Breath of the Wild was like all the new shrines, the additional dungeon. In the case of Xenoblade, it was the entire Torna DLC, and in this case it is now this new storyline. So they have been pretty much going all out with that stuff, and I think it's a decent value. I haven't been incentivized to buy the pass until now, but I will pick it up for this, essentially. I basically wait until the big major part comes out, then I buy it, and then I end up not really doing any of the extra bonus things that had been leading up to release, because I believe they added like a bunch of costumes or something, like maid outfits and some nonsense. Oh dear, Nintendo. Anyway, it looks great, and I am very much in for that when it comes out next month. So cool stuff. We are slowly filling out this calendar as we go along. Speaking of DLC, let's move on to the Pokemon DLC, because that got announced as well. And it is interesting. I think it's interesting in a few ways. Obviously, they're bringing back some Pokemon. There's about 200 new Pokemon or old Pokemon that will now be back into the game, as they had originally not been able to.
So how many short are they still? Like a whole 200 or 300 odd?
Yeah, probably. I think so. I don't know how many total there are. Maybe there's 900 total, and currently there were 400.
They did confirm that they weren't trying to ever have them all in a single game or something, right?
Well, that's what they had said originally, but even at that point in time, like, they were lying, because to have an expansion pass of this size, they had to have planned this and had to have been working on these expansions at the time when they denied they were going to add new Pokemon to the game. So it's one of those things where they kind of shot themselves in the foot for it, but you're not going to be like, and we have expansions coming out, because there's specific marketing messaging they have around it.
Okay.
I think a lot of people have been angry about, like, oh, Sword and Shield is very thin as a game, and it feels like a lot of this stuff, should have maybe been in the original release itself. And, like, I kind of get that, but at the same time, this is a significant thing on its own.
It's still an improvement to put out new cool stuff that's not attached to playing the whole game again in an Emerald, Pokemon Yellow 100%. Style, right?
Right, totally. I feel like this is the direction Pokemon should have gone in, like, at least 5-6 years ago, because quite frankly, either the sequel version or the Emerald Platinum idea has always been a stupid idea, in my opinion, because you just have to play through the fucking game again that you already played.
Yeah, it's like the greatest detriment to Pokemon is almost sometimes the fact that it sells so well, and like there's this reluctance to change that formula at all, even for expansions.
Totally.
It has to be adding something onto an existing package to sell more,
Right, but also if you do follow the sales of those additional versions, they usually are much worse performing than, the Diamond and Pearl will perform much better than Platinum will, for example. Whereas in this case, you already have a huge install base of people who own Sword and Shield. The internet is now a thing that everyone uses, and just accessing the eShop, like Nintendo's ability to go with digital a lot more, kind of since the Wii U generation, has meant that now I think they're confident that people are like, okay, yeah, we can download this expansion pass and understand what it is. And I think the price is fine. Like, I think it's kind of half of what you would pay for the regular game, and you're getting 2 large kind of areas as a result, as well as a bunch of new clothing stuff, which I love. The customization in Sword and Shield is one of my favorite parts of the game, so that's awesome. You have these 2 essentially much larger wild areas. And so, haven't said, I think most people know, but like the first part is the Isle of Armor, which seems kind of Japanese themed to some extent. Kind of like this island and interesting kind of area you go around. And then part 2 is like a frozen tundra area. It's called the Crown Tundra. And there will be different Pokemon in each area, as well as just a bunch of new things added. I wonder if there's new gyms. There's obviously a few new legendary Pokemon that have been added to the game, and there'll probably be like a storyline that goes along with that, as kind of nonsensical and pointless as it will be, as is the case with Pokemon stories. But I like the look of it. I actually was pretty surprised by what this is and the proposition, because to be honest with you, the coolest thing about Sword and Shield, aside from encountering all the new Pokemon, was the wild area. Like, I really enjoyed moments like finding level 50 Steelix with my Drizzile and being able to kill it, even though I was level 30, and being like, oh man, that's like a cool concept, and like getting XP for that and like growing your party much faster.
It's kind of like Xenoblade Chronicles in a way, where you're on that
Yes,
field and you bump into something too powerful, but you think you
Totally.
might be able to take it on and get the XP, you know?
Right, 100%.
Risk reward.
Yeah, so I really like that, and I like the idea of having more wild areas. Now, I think they certainly have a huge way to go in terms of making the wild area something truly new and innovative. And
like the next game, the entire game could be like a wild area, as in like
absolutely
with the camera a bit more expansive. Did the wild area run okay for you? I heard a lot of people moaning about the frame rate and dipping.
Right. So the frame rate with the wild area is 100% tied to the internet stuff. If you are connected online, then it will chug to hell. If you aren't connected online, it's fine. Like, it runs at a pretty stable 30 frames per second. So as long as you aren't connected to the internet, which, to be frank with you, there's no reason to be connected to the internet. The only thing it does is it populates your world with other trainers, but you can't interact with them at all. They're just like ghosts that you run through. It literally does nothing. The reason you would have to connect to the internet is if you're doing a raid battle, and in which case, as soon as you get to the raid area, then you would turn on your internet to then allow participants to help you with it, essentially. And obviously, you know, in the overworld, if you want to do a trade or a battle, you do have to turn the internet on. I, for the most part, just kept it off because in the wild area, it would just slow the game to a crawl. So it's not that the game can't run, it's that the internet is so bad that it just chugs it, essentially. Which, it's not a thing you should excuse, but hey, there's a way to mitigate it. So it doesn't destroy the game for me. Yeah, I mean, I know you haven't picked up Sword and Shield yet, Bally. Does this do anything to raise your interest at all? I feel like it would be cool if you could play these independently, right? Like, if they weren't tied to already owning Sword and Shield and just were standalone things in their own right, and I think that's...
I mean, I'm sure I could just blast through Sword or Shield really quickly and get to it if I was keen to. I also thought, like, Pokemon Sun in parts felt quite light. There are parts of that game where it feels like if you just mainline it, there's not a whole lot of world to explore.
No.
And as a world, it just feels very small in comparison to the previous game I played in the Pokemon series, I guess, Pearl, Gen 4. So, yeah, I'm interested in what the wild areas feel like. And the end of last year just got too congested with stuff coming out and Game of the Year and all that kind of jazz. But I'd be interested to maybe dip into Shield at some point, maybe down the line. I'm not sure.
Cool. I think I will pick this up as well. I would be interested to play through these new areas, and also I've been meaning to get back to my Pokedex filling, so this just makes it a lot harder, I guess.
You're going to do it.
I don't know. Now that they're adding 200 more Pokemon, I'm kind of like, well, maybe this is not an achievable thing for me anymore. I should have maybe gone and done the Pokedex. Yeah, I should have done the original Pokedex and then done the new one when this comes out. But, you know, we'll see. Do you think the
hardcore Pokemon sphere, how do they feel about this news?
I don't know. I've seen mixed opinions generally. I think there's lots of people who are angry, and they're going to be angry no matter what, so it's not worth listening to their opinions. They have bad opinions. But there's also people who are like, yeah, this looks cool. I would try it out. I also wish that Sword and Shield had been better, but Game Freak have made a proposition here that this honestly is much more enticing to me than the second iteration of a game ever has been in the past. Because even with those, like, the extra content you get is so slight. Like, it is like a couple of hours tacked on at the end usually. It's really... And it's like Battle Tower stuff sometimes gets held back or withdrawn for those iterations, and that a lot of the time was like, well, let's lock a choice scarf behind this. And it's like, well, fuck's sake, man, I want a choice scarf now. I don't want to deal with that nonsense and have to get another version to get different items. Obviously, I don't think they did those types of items, but there was other things like, I don't know, calciums and proteins. And anyway, I think generally sentiment has been more positive than negative, but there's always going to be people shouting loudly angry opinions about Pokemon on the internet, and I would say just block those people and move on with your lives, because it's not worth living life that way. So, yeah, cool. And then, Bally, do you want to take the lead on this part?
Sure.
'Cause this kind of is your jam here.
Yeah, so we've got kind of like a trailer and a bit of like hype built around Super Nintendo World, which is coming to Universal Studios in Osaka in time for the Tokyo Olympic Games this summer, 2020. Now, I should say that Super Nintendo World is also confirmed to come to Universal Singapore and the two Universal parks in East and West Coast United States. I don't know when they're confirmed for later, but they are keen to get the Japanese one at least ready for Tokyo Summer Olympics, which I don't know about you, but the idea of going to a theme park launch in Japan during the Olympics sounds like literal hell on earth. Like, I don't know why you would go day one, but, you know, I'm sure hundreds of thousands of people will, and
they will try for certain.
And now there's this weird trailer with that singer who you
Charlie XCX.
Charlie XCX, yep, that famous person that I don't know who they are.
She is very well known, Bally. You're just like completely out of any sort of pop cultural lens at the moment.
I don't have a sister who's into pop music. That's my problem.
Exactly. Yeah, like if you aren't like within the mainstream sphere of music and have, you know, ways that you can
Your
find
sister,
that stuff
she knows her stuff when it comes to music.
Oh, she does.
Like,
yeah, she's all about it. Yeah.
And it's weird seeing trailers for theme parks that don't actually show the theme park in a weird.
It's like my problem with new video game announcements that are just have no information. It's like, here's Godfall, and I'm like, I don't know what that is, and it's like, it's the first PS5 game. I'm like, I don't care. I don't know what that is. I just dislike that practice. The only time that I will take a CGI or like a cinematic trailer is when you have a good idea what the game will be. Like, Breath of the Wild 2 is great. It doesn't show any gameplay, but that trailer is exciting because there's a prospect, you know, a benchmark of what that game potentially can be, because you already have an example of what the previous one is, versus a brand new IP, which is like, here's a CGI trailer for our brand new IP, and you have no idea what the genre is, like how it's actually going to play. That's where CGI trailers make zero sense to me.
Exactly. So in this trailer, you see stuff like clouds from Mario Brothers levels with like a beanstalk leading up to them in the sky. And you're like, well, I'm pretty sure they're not going to go for that. So, and you see like these pitfalls that drop into like abyss. And it's like, well, that looks like that would breach health and safety regulations. So I'm guessing they're not going to include that. So it's just kind of working out from the CGI trailer what actually is real and what's not. And I watched some sort of game explain analysis of it, and like the CGI trailer does completely perfectly match up kind of like the park layouts that had been revealed beforehand at like the area of Universal Studios. And you've got two main rides for the initial launch. One is a Mario Kart ride, and each cart is a 2x2 seat formation, so front row and back row, and it's some sort of augmented reality where you've got some sort of goggles or headset on, and you are looking out into the real world. And obviously in this augmented reality world, you're throwing shells, you're throwing bananas, you are interacting in some way in Mario Kart. And like, it's not clear from this trailer how that's going to work or what it's like, but that's certainly one of the more intriguing aspects of this like Super Nintendo world.
Yeah, I mean, that like the headpiece idea, like theme parks, hundreds of thousands of people each using the same one, that sounds like a health and safety nightmare to me.
So they've already done, like, there are rides that have VR headsets on them already, and I've never actually been on one, so I don't know about the whole wiping them down. I don't feel like I would ever want to do that, I know what you mean.
Like, it
I know what you mean.
seems
I definitely would want to try it once, but I mean, from a sickness perspective, I'm scared that might be pretty horrendous, kind of wearing a headset and then being thrown around. But yeah, and then the other ride is like a more tame kind of like you ride on a single Yoshi, and it's in some sort of, it's like a trail that goes around through like Super Mario World, I guess. And those are sort of the two main rides. And then the main theme is very Mushroom Kingdom based. There's not really anything beyond that at the moment. There's like Bowser's Castle, Peach's Castle. It all seems quite simple.
It is interesting, right? Because it's called Super Nintendo World, but it is very Mario focused, and obviously like that is the main part of Nintendo's brand. Like, it is their character who appeals to the widest possible audience and I think is the most recognizable. I think they've mentioned there will be some Zelda stuff there as well, but like it seems very Mario dominated.
Yeah, I mean, to my knowledge, those are the only 2 rides so far, and like, yes, there will be more to come, and that's always the case with theme park and stuff in new areas. They always get put at the bare minimum at first, and then everyone comes in, and then they eventually expand it with more rides. And that's certainly what Disney did with like Galaxy's Edge and their theme park. So like, there's more to come. And there's also like a huge emphasis on like these power-up bands, and there's like a Toad one, a Peach one, Mario, Luigi, Yoshi that you can like buy, and they link up to some app on your phone. And it's like, what's the one thing I don't have when I'm on holiday is data. So it's like, they need to make sure they have good Wi-Fi settings if that was something I'd go on holiday to and enjoy. But just the idea of playing games on your phone through apps and collecting things in different parts of a theme park, to me it kind of gets away from like the actual enjoyment of a theme park and going there, looking at things with your own eyes and going on rides and experiences and shows and things. It's like quite a, like, playing through apps and on your phone feels like something I could do outside of a theme park, and it feels weird when they try really hard to integrate it. And obviously it's to do with money making, selling those power bands, and I don't know. I've got like, when it comes to theme parks, I'm a much bigger fan of what Disney do and what they go for. They spend a lot more money, I would argue, on the really small stuff. And don't get me wrong, I think Universal have done a fantastic job with stuff like Harry Potter. Like, those are incredibly cool areas. And I've been in Islands of Adventure and Universal Studios in Orlando, and the way that those link up with like the Hogwarts Express, there's a lot of thought going into that. I'm not saying there's not thought going into this. I'm hopeful that there's more, and that the world of Nintendo branches beyond Mario Brothers and Yoshi and Mario Kart. And like, I'm confident that in time it will expand. And like, Nintendo's a big property that I think will work well theme park wise. It's just this was a really weird way of selling it, and also just trying, like, I think some aspects of it are going to be so rushed if they've been trying like hell to get this out ready in time for the Tokyo Olympic Games. It's like, that's never going to end well. So I'm skeptical about what it's going to be like in 2020, but I'm pretty confident it'll be pretty cool down the line.
Yeah, it'll iron itself out, and there'll be more added, and it'll eventually be a thing where you just go and have a great time, which will be very cool at some point in the future. I mean, I feel like, do you think they'll do any like AR integration, like Pokemon Go inspired in the app, in terms of like, hey,
probably.
go to this point on the map and then jump with your hand in the air and the wristband, and you'll hit an invisible block, and you'll get a thing. I don't know. Yeah,
like, I think that's the direction they're going in, and why it is a band. Like, it does interact with like your movement, I believe. So like, yes, there is more to it than how I initially described it. So like, yeah, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Did you listen to Kind of Funny Games Daily?
I don't know what you're specifically talking about.
Okay.
I did. But, yeah.
It was names. Who's the guy who did Rogue One script?
Gary Whitta.
Gary Whitta. So he was encouraging Greg Miller and the team to all go to Osaka this summer.
To Japan. Yes. Yeah. No, I know.
That was pretty funny. So
yeah, I mean, there will be people, YouTubers who do theme park stuff going there. I've watched some YouTube videos of people building their lightsabers in Galaxy's Edge and being very jealous about it and want to go there real bad. Yeah. But that's what will happen. There will always be people who go and document these things in this day and age. Like, our lives are online, so of course it's not surprising in any way.
Right. Right.
Cool. Yeah. So lots of interesting smaller pieces of news. But I think overall it's a good start to the year, and I think it's just a nice kind of cleaning out almost of like, okay, let's get rid of all that 2019 stuff, announce it all, and kind of clean out the deck for Pokemon, Fire Emblem, Smash Brothers, reset it now, and now we're in a prime position, like, after all these presentations and news announcements for, okay, what's 2020 now? Like, now we're like a couple of weeks into the year, and already Nintendo have kind of cleared out any hanging threads.
Right.
So yeah, it's exciting stuff. I really. Do you want to lay down a prediction for the date and time or whatever for the Nintendo Direct?
What are we on now?
Should we take a bet on it?
we're currently recording on Thursday the 16th. It's
Yeah.
going to go out on Monday the 20th.
I am going to stake my bet on Thursday the 6th of February.
Okay.
Which is like a halfway house between end of Jan and Feb. Like, I think start of Feb. Give it a couple of weeks to breathe. Let the Smash Brothers come out on the 29th, right? Let the character come out. Then you don't have to worry about that anymore. The next news cycle starts again, and we kind of start on that day. So that's my prediction. The 6th of Feb.
I'm going to go for the Thursday the 13th because that would match us up better with our recording schedule.
Oh, good. Yeah. Perfect. Yes, let's just decide that would be much more beneficial for us.
Thursday the 6th, a show's just come out 3 days ago, and we'll be like, damn, right. Okay,
yeah.
mind.
I mean, we can
Gonna be
always do
waiting for our
an
take.
emergency show if necessary.
Perhaps.
And also that maybe makes some sense because the Fire Emblem expansion will come out that day. So then you could be like, and reminder, buy the Fire Emblem expansion. So that could be a smart way to handle it. But yeah, that is going to close out the show. Thanks for listening, folks. It's going to be a cool 2020, I think. Lots of fun things to discuss and play as well. So let's close things out and talk about where you can find us, where you can support us, all that good stuff. We, of course, have a Patreon, and you can go find us at patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, where people can find lots of extra podcasts that we do on lots of different topics. We just did one in January, which was all about the magical world of... I can't remember what the show we just did was.
Music.
Music, that's the one. Music.
Magical
It was
world
such
of
a memorable show. I could definitely... No, it was good. So we talk about our taste in music and things like that. So it's a $5 patron show if you would like to get access to that. And obviously we have bonus episodes going out every month, which is a very neat thing. And we'd like, obviously, to thank some of our patrons for supporting us, Bally.
Yes, thank you to all of our patrons, but thank you especially to our two $10 tier patrons. They are my fiance Caroline and Atari Alex. Thank you for your $10 tier support. And yes, as MBZ says, you get an extra 12 shows a year if you support us on that $5 tier. You get both our shows, TNL Ranks and TNL Takes. And then for $2 a month, you get 6 extra shows a year, and you will be able to listen to episodes of TNL Ranks.
Absolutely. So check that out if that sounds cool to you. You can also find us all over the internet places. Our podcast has a Twitter account, which is at TNL Podcast. It's a good place to go to find everything we're doing. Link to our Discord.
I did a new pinned tweet where you should all check out our Discord, as you said, MZ, our email address, ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We need more emails. And also, there's a whole YouTube playlist complete with timestamps that I think many people are unaware of that is definitely worth shouting about. So if you want to jump into previous episodes and you just want to skip through to parts you're more interested in, there's a whole playlist there that's all pinned on a tweet on our Twitter account at TNL Podcast.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at LordNBZ. Where can they find you, Bally?
Find me on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91.
Good stuff. Obviously, we're all over the internet in various places. We're on Spotify, we're on Stitcher, we're on TuneIn, we're on any podcatching app that you can find.
Podcasts in the UK yet?
No, I don't think so. Haven't checked in a while.
There's loads of British podcasts I listen to that don't actually know, and they all like hypothesize at the end of the show, like, is it in the UK yet? And they all say the same thing.
Well, I mean, I used to do the same thing as well, but I don't know. At some point, Google, the international worldwide brand, will expand beyond the fucking United States, apparently. We shall see. But yes, for the time being, just go to whatever podcast app you have. Most of them link in with iTunes, and so it finds them. And while you're there, give us a review. Leave us a nice review on Apple Podcasts, because honestly, that is the best way for people to find the show. It is very helpful if you do that and review us on there. We would very much appreciate it, and we read your reviews out on the show. So please, if you want a chance to be run out, a nice review would be a good way to do that. Okay, well, that pretty much does it. Any other things before we close, Bally? Any last nuggets of wisdom?
I'm trucking on with my game trade game.
Oh, good. Very exciting things ahead. I am looking forward to the point at which you cross-examine a parrot. That's it's gonna be a good part of the video game that I will enjoy discussing.
It's
with
already
you.
Kind of veered into the world of the supernatural, so I wasn't expecting that.
Oh no, that's a big part of the series for sure. So cool stuff. We will see you, of course, in a couple of weeks' time with another episode to talk about lots more Nintendo games and the news of the day and everything fun. So until then, thank you everyone for listening, and we'll be back very soon. Bye-bye. The musical interludes used on today's show were the main theme from The Last of Us, copyright Naughty Dog 2013, and Clock Tower from Dead Cells, copyright Motion Twin 2018.